Good evening, everyone, and thank you for attending this hybrid meeting of the Governance Committee on Tuesday, 22nd of September 2020. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Councillor Ian Watkinson and I'm the chair of this committee. Councillor Colin Sharples is the vice chair. Also present with me are our officers and Councillor Paul Foster. We also have our external auditors, Simon Hardman and Mark Stocks, who are dialing in on Microsoft Teams, and welcome to Mark Stocks to his first Governance Committee meeting.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Mark, you're very welcome. Please note this is an audio and video meeting. It's been recorded and the stream will also be live on YouTube. The web address for this is displayed on the agenda for the meeting and can be found on the Council's website. Members are asked to keep their microphone on mute and only unmute when they wish to speak. Members and officers present in the Shield Room are also asked to ensure that they keep the microphone switched off unless they are speaking and to mute themselves afterwards in order to avoid any feedback. Only one microphone across both the Shield Room and Microsoft Teams can be activated at any one time. Reports will be presented by officers, after which I will bring the report into committee. If any member of the committee wishes to speak on any item, you should indicate that you would like to speak. I'll then invite you in order. And after the committee has considered the reports, we'll move on to the vote, as no representations have been received from members not on committee or members of the public. Okay, so that's the preamble. You'll all be used to it by now. So we'll crack on with item number 1. Any apologies, please?
None, Chair.
Okay, thanks very much. Item number 2, declarations of interest. As this is a hybrid meeting, if any member has a pecuniary interest, they're requested to leave the meeting completely rather than just mute their microphone. The member can rejoin the meeting following the completion of the item in question. Does anyone have any interest to declare? No? Marvellous, we'll crack on. Item number 3. Minutes of the last meeting. I've got the minutes of the last meeting in front of me for approval. Do we have a seconder for that? Thank you very much. Can I sign those off then? We're on a roll. Item number 4, external audit 2018 to 19 update. So I'm going to invite our external auditors, Mark Stocks and Simon Hardman, to present this item. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Chair. It's Simon who I'll be presenting this particular one. So this is just a verbal update on where we're at with the 2018-19 audit. So we're making good progress in completing the work with the help of the finance team. We had a meeting with them yesterday where we discussed progress. And it's fair to say that we're looking to finish sort of our testing within the next couple of weeks. Because of the nature of some of our inquiries as well, particularly around property, plant and equipment, some of those queries are sort of linked as well and will help us when we actually start the work on our 1920 audit. So it should help some efficiency there. For the VFM conclusion, we are looking to complete that work during October. And to assist me in the work, we're looking to bring in some specialist support from within Grant Thornton. That will help provide additional expertise to consider some of those issues that have been raised. But it'll also enable me to do actually more work on the financial statements audit so we can clear that as quickly as possible. Just at the last meeting, there was a query in relation to whether we'd be referring to the utilities findings from internal audits work. So I can confirm that it was one of the issues that we've considered when finalising our 2019-20 plan and help focus on some of the risk areas and therefore some of the testing. And Mark will pick that up, or the sort of risk areas as part of the 1920 plan. So that's just an overall sort of brief update on 18-19, just to say that the work's progressing. I think it's just worthwhile as well, just what the opportunity just to mention sort of a general update. Our technical team has issued a new progress report template yesterday, and it features some sort of great update material on a number of issues, including responding to sort of COVID, the new Code of Audit Practice, which will be bringing in a new approach to our VFM work. But it also highlighted the Redmond review. And your Section 151 officers just asked whether we could just quickly bring a few key issues from that to your attention. I don't know if you remember, but the Redmond review was examining the effectiveness of local audit and its ability to demonstrate sort of accountability for audit performance to the public. The report was published on the 8th of September, and it's made a number of key recommendations within that report. That, for example, includes the recommendation bringing in a new regulator, the Office of Local Audit and Regulation to replace the FRC, scope to sort of revise fees, and also crucially, I think, and one thing which we'll appreciate in sort of normal times, the return to the 30th of September deadline rather than the 31st of July, which I think will be welcomed by ourselves and also by your finance team. Also highlights as well the potential for the account simplification. So that will be another thing which it will help. It will be some time off because it's got to go through sort of the legal processes, as it were, and go through Parliament. But as I said, at least that was some good news and welcomed by ourselves, and I know it's also been welcomed by your finance team as well. Happy to take any questions. I just thought I'd mention that I would send through the progress report template. I'll update it and send it through to your officers for circulation. Thank you.
Thanks, Simon. Is Mark going to speak on this item as well, or not?
I wasn't Chair. I'm happy to take any questions, but I'll speak to the 1920 plan when you're ready.
Okay, well, let's see if there's any questions first on this item 1819. So any questions, please, from the committee? Councillor Turner, sorry, I'm looking at you. I'm looking right at you, not your red light that's on. I do apologise.
You mentioned the utilities report in the minutes, and you gave an answer to that. And before that, there's an action that says about following inquiries from members about timescales for finalising the audit. This is for the 19/8/20, I think, timescale. A date will be provided at present, but reassurance was provided that a plan including timescales was being developed. So when are we going to, do you have a forecast date of when you're going to be able to have that plan that allows you to manage that audit and gives me confidence that you're going to deliver when you say you're going to deliver?
Yeah, I mean, in effect, the work is ongoing. So the next governance committee is on the 17th of November, and I would expect that by that point, the work would be completed and we'd be bringing our audit findings report. There's never any guarantee in that we still, obviously, the thing with audit is you just do not know what you're going to find. So basically, but if everything goes to plan, then we will bring in our final report through to that 17th of November governance committee. But as I said, the one key thing I would just emphasise is that when you are doing audit work, you just never know what you're going to find. So we can't plan ahead that much. But I don't know if Mark's got any comments as well.
Can I just ask, sorry, I was asking about the plan that you said you were going to put together. I assume it's a programme plan which may or may not be derailed, but at least it's a plan that shows what issues you're looking at and what you're going to resolve, and a forecast date of an end deliverable for the report.
Yeah,
I'm talking about the plan, not the work that you're doing.
Yeah, the 1920 audit plan is coming through. The 1819 plan, I mean, basically the 1819 work is progressing to a point where we're just going through the queries now to complete the accounts work. And then also for the VFM conclusion work, that's going to take place during October. So, I mean, that's the plan, that we're progressing the work as we speak. And that's going to be, as I said, in the update, that we're looking to try and complete that within the next 2 weeks, if at all possible. And the VFM conclusion work will take place in October.
So are we going to get a plan with timescales on it?
There will be no detailed plan that we'll be
I wouldn't want a detailed plan, because obviously I don't know your business and what you need to do, but just kind of like the visibility of an executive summary plan, which gives me confidence that if we have a forecast date and it slips, we all understand why it slipped and the issues that you've got and how you're trying to manage them. And at the moment, there is no visibility of that for me, other than the verbal updates we get at every governance meeting.
I'm happy to put
Hi,
that
Simon.
into
Simon, can I just come in? I think that's fair, Councillor. So what we'll do, we'll draft a letter that sets out a very clear timetable for you and gives you a view in terms of when we're going to complete the financial statements audit for 18-19. I think that timetable is really clear to me, that we should be bringing that to you on the 17th of November. But we'll also highlight where we are with the value for money audit, because that I think is a bit trickier, because of obviously we're dealing with some of the governance issues that have impacted on the council in the past. But we'll put that all in writing and send a letter to officers so you have a clear timetable.
Yeah, and the other thing I was just going to say was just picking up on what Mark has said, that basically if I send through the progress report, I will include that timetable. I was actually planning to include that timetable within that progress report. So that will add that clarity, and I'll ask the officers to circulate that report through to members of the committee.
Thanks for that, Mark and Simon. Any other questions from the committee on 18-19, or should we move on to the 19-20 report and roll the two items into one, essentially? Yeah, we'll crack on then. Okay, so item 5, external audit 19-20. Is this going to be you, Mark?
It is, Chair. Thank you. Thank you for the invite. So just say hello to everybody. My name's Mark Stocks. I'm a partner in Grant Thornton, and I'm the head of public sector assurance. Obviously, I'm standing in for Mark Heap, who's not available at the moment. So my primary focus is to get these audits done. I've been working with Simon for the past couple of weeks to make sure we get a team on site to deliver the 18-19 audit, and I think it's important that we then focus on the 19-20 audit and try and give you some closure on the governance issues, but also I suppose some detail on our view about what's happened in the past. So that's what this report does, really. It talks you through what we're going to do around 19-20 and some of the issues that we're going to be looking at. So if I could just take you to page 3, which is entitled Introduction and Headlines. So the audit's divided into 2, as you're aware. It covers the financial statements audit, and it covers value for money as well. What this page does is give you a highlight of where we're going to be focusing our work. So in terms of the significant risks, then there are 5 of them. A couple of those are quite standard. Those are to do with the valuation of land and buildings and of net pension fund liabilities. They're significant estimates in your financial statements, so it's important that we give them due attention. Another standard one is management override of control, but I think it's slightly different for the council in the circumstances that you've been through over the past sort of year and a half, because obviously, there's some potential examples where management have overridden control in the past. And so, we're going to increase our scrutiny of those controls, particularly around journals, to make sure that we're comfortable in terms of what's been happening. Similarly, I suppose in terms of COVID, that's a change in terms of approach for us, because we're very, very aware of the impacts of COVID, not only on society but also in terms of councils and their financial sustainability. So there's various impacts in terms of what COVID can do to councils, which I'm sure you're more than aware of in terms of its impact on revenues, in terms of council tax collection and NDR collection, and also in terms of sundry debt. But also it impacts on investment properties and their valuations, and on the value of your investment. So it is important that we respond to that appropriately. So there is a level of focus and time that we've put into doing that work. The final one around expenditure recognition is rather unusual. We don't tend to include that within local authority audit plans, because usually those expenditure controls operate effectively. But again, because of some of the council's history, as with management override of control, there are instances around where perhaps those controls haven't operated effectively, and we need to make sure that where you have incurred expenditure, that it's been brought to account properly and that it was appropriate to incur in the first place. So there is a focus within the plan around expenditure recognition. Materiality is similar to last year, but both this year and last year we've reduced the level of materiality. A standard materiality for a council would be, or a council of your type, would be around 2%. But because of some of the issues that you've encountered, we've reduced that down to 1.5%. That increases the work that we do, increases the level of sampling and the areas that we actually work on. But I do think that's appropriate in the circumstances. So that's the major focus in terms of the financial statements. In terms of value for money, there are two areas of focus: one around governance arrangements and one around financial sustainability. To be fair, Simon and I debated quite hard about financial sustainability and what we actually did there, because the council has a very strong balance sheet and a very low level of indebtedness. But I think in the circumstances around COVID, we decided that we ought to do that work and just understand what the impacts on you are and the impacts on your medium-term financial plan. So we will look at the financial sustainability of the council and we'll report back. Can I just take you a bit further through the report so I can talk around governance? If I can take you to page 13 of the report. The major focus of our work, and both in 1819 on value for money, will be around those governance arrangements. It's not been possible to have finalised that work before this, because we needed to see what your own reviews were finding, particularly the work that's been done by internal audit, and there's no point in us both doing the same work. So now that's completed and we're clear of what the issues are and what your findings are. We're going to spend some time corroborating those and making sure that we're comfortable with the findings that have been placed in front of you. But the areas that we're going to look at in some detail are around the risk that information was withheld from members in terms of your ability to make decisions when that occurred. There's some allegations around bullying and non-compliance with HR policies. There's some instances where services don't seem to have been effectively governed due to I suppose lack of policy and procedure. And there are also instances which I suppose is of high concern to me in terms of where procurement rules haven't been followed and where officer appointment rules haven't been followed. So we're going to spend the next sort of month or so looking at that. Simon said we'll bring in some people from our forensics team who will give us some surety over over what's being said to us, and then we will form a view in terms of how that impacts on our opinion on value for money for the council. And we'll do that across the 2 years, across both 18-19 and 19-20. So you'll get one view across both years. I wasn't going to talk in any more detail to the report, Chair. I probably talked in more detail than you wished, but I was aware the report came rather late to committee. More than happy to take any questions on what I've said or the content of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for delivering that. So I'm going to ask if there are any committee members that would like to ask any questions. I'm looking for lights. Councillor Bretherton.
Yeah, hi. Thank you, Chair. It's just regarding the value for money section. It's going back to the previous year when we had a cabinet meeting on the 13th of November. It's regarding the Mackenzie Arms. I've brought this up before, and it's getting increasingly concerning, especially with the last cabinet meeting on the 16th of September. There was a report, a professional surveyor's report, that indicated that there would be a permanent loss of capital of about £700,000. And under the value for money section, there was an indication that there would be better alternatives where there wouldn't be a permanent loss of capital. In the latest report on the 16th of September, it mentions the right to buy scheme, which we're all in favour of. But this could raise another significant risk to the council, that there could be further losses incurred. The surveyor's report indicates the end value of the scheme is about £1.34 million. Let's round that up to 1.5 million, just for rounding up figures. The right to buy scheme allows the tenants the right to buy at a 35% discount. So assuming it's a 35% discount on the value, that would incur another £525,000 capital loss. So the council could, in effect, end up with a loss of about £1.2 million, assuming that the tenants exercise the right to buy and we sell the properties on. To me, that's quite a significant loss to the council that could be avoided by following the recommendation of the surveyor going back to November last year. And I'm just wondering what the thoughts are from our auditor about the concept of value for money and potentially losing significant sums by following a certain path. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, over to you, Mark.
Thank you, Chair. We sort of look at value for money quite closely. It's it's part of the NAO's code. My understanding is that this issue relates to the 2020-21 financial year. So quite naturally, it wouldn't fall under the 19-20 plan. I suppose what I would anticipate is that the council's own arrangements would pick this kind of concern up. If the council has concerns, then I think it's right that you bring them to the attention of the executive, and that they're considered, and hopefully that you get a response that provides you with some surety that the council is getting value for money from its transactions. Obviously, if you remain concerned, then you do have the facility to write to me and sort of outlining your concerns, and that's something I will pick up initially in conversation with the Chief Executive and Director of Finance, and then I would proceed from there.
Thanks, Mark. Very specific there. Any other questions from the members of the committee? Members not on the committee. Councillor Foster.
Thanks, Chair. Just on the point that's just been raised by Councillor Bretherton, it's Councillor Bretherton has been provided on a number of occasions by the statutory officers the explanation to these issues, yet Councillor Bretherton unfortunately isn't willing to listen to the information that he's been provided with. And this is not an issue for the Governance Committee, this is an issue for the Council. However, I can wholeheartedly support the decisions that this Council have made that have been supported by a number of external parties, but most importantly, our statutory officers. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Foster. And I think I'd agree with you that we need to be careful not to stray away from Governance Committee business. Any other questions for our external auditors? No, well, thanks very much. I'm just looking for some advice here. Are these two reports for noting? Do we need to vote on these items or not? Okay. Well, thanks very much to Mark and to Simon, and we look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you, Chair.
I was going to ask you, Mark, to do a charade or a song as traditional, but we'll perhaps let you off this time. Have one ready for next time.
Well, that's not where my talents lie, Chair. So I'm not sure the committee would enjoy it. So.
There's no pressure. Okay. Thanks very much. Okay, moving on to item number 6, Treasury Management Annual Report 2019-20 and June Quarter Monitoring 2020 to 2021. Members advised that the report for this item can be found in Supplementary 1, starting on page 9, and we've got Tony and James, or is it just you, Tony?
I'm not sure James is dialed in. I know he has been trying, but oh no, I think he might have just
James
arrived.
Is on Teams.
Yes, at this very moment.
Okay. Over to you guys. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Chair. Well, this is it's the usual end-of-year report summarising Treasury management activities. The key points are summarised in paragraph 4, beginning on page 9. So I won't repeat any of those at any great length. The first one is the one that says yes, things very much as normal. The capital programme was fully financed, and long-term borrowing remains at 0. The next point, raising the temporary borrowing of £10 million. I think I rather stole my thunder on this one a few weeks ago when we were looking at the accounts, and it was there on the balance sheet. So again, probably no need for me to repeat the circumstances that led to that. In March 2020, we did have a very sudden and very dramatic drop, and in the base rate. Not that the rates were particularly high to begin with, but with the onset of the pandemic, yes, we are now down at 0.1%, and clearly linking into the Q1 monitoring, that has had an impact on the returns we're receiving. It's not quite as miserable as I've made it look, because it's not really 0.17% we've been averaging. I'm afraid I went and divided that by 4, I'm sorry, and it's actually 0.68 that we have made so far during the year. Our budget is £300,000 for the year. That is looking really quite challenging at this stage. There's every reason to believe we will be well in excess of 200,000, but 300,000 may yet prove something of a stretch. And then the last point is there were a couple of times during the year when we exceeded our £6 million counterparty limit. So first of all, my apologies on the first one. At a previous meeting, I suggested that wasn't actually a breach, and I'm afraid my head was stuck in a previous council on that. So yes, for this council, yes, that was over the £6 million. But mostly what I'd like to stress is that there was absolutely no increase in risk to the council and absolutely no financial loss. And in actual fact, these were both loans to local authorities, so really about as safe can get. And if anything, we probably gained a little bit in terms of the interest. And mostly I'd like to stress that there were very particular circumstances around each of these, and there's really no suggestion that there's any problem with the underlying procedures, which remain fully sound, though of course we are looking at whether they might yet be, well, still further strengthened. So I think James might wish to add something on that, Chair, but beyond that, I'm
Thanks, Tony.
Take questions.
That's great. Over to Jeff.
Thanks, Tony. No, I think you covered it really. In that some of this borrowing, of course, was necessary, especially during the start of lockdown at late March, really. So we had to get on with getting some borrowing in, really, to make sure that we had the cash flow necessary. And then when it turned out that the government has supported councils in terms of their cash flow, we had to then, of course, put this money somewhere where it could earn some interest. So, but like Tony said there, that there was no additional risk to the councils. It was just a couple of occasions, really.
Thanks, James, and thanks again, Tony. Any questions from members of the committee? Councillor Mrs. Smith.
Thank you. It's on page 17. It's the investment performance to 2019-20, and it actually states there that the bank rate would rise from 7.5 to 1% in September 2020. I think that probably is actually 2019, and I think it further goes on to say that it has now been announced in December 2020, and I think that should also be 2019. So I think those two are not quite right, if I'm reading it right. In the particular instance, I think it relates to is the year before. Also, I think it is, well, it does say on page 16 about the misunderstanding in communications regarding the amount of money that was loaned to North Lanarkshire. It is most definitely a breach of our policy, and while it has been put down as a brief misunderstanding, I do think it's something that we should be very careful of. There is a second breach with Chorley Borough Council, and therefore I do think we should look very carefully into these matters and make sure that it doesn't happen again, because they are breaches of our protocols. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Smith. Do you want to come back on any of those points, Tony?
I think, Chair, just to mention the particular day when with North Lanarkshire, it was a rather unusual day. There was rather a lot going on. There were a number of potential options on offer at broadly similar rates, and yes, it really just was for a moment, in the conversations with different brokers that a wire got slightly crossed. It wasn't that we lent £7 million to North Lanarkshire on that day. We actually lent them £2 million, but we already had £5 million with them.
Okay, thanks for that, Tony, and thanks for your frankness and honesty on that. But I think, Councillor Mrs. Smith, you're absolutely right. We do need to be as careful as we can be at all times. Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Chair. Tony, just a quick question. On page 9, we talk about the temporary borrowing of 10 million. It was borrowed in March and paid back in June, the same year. Sorry, in late March 2020, exceptional circumstances, it result in the council entering into temporary borrowing of 10 million. It's on page 9, yeah. Then we, I think my understanding is we subsequently paid that back in June 2020, on page 10. Last paragraph. Page 10, last paragraph of the section 4 key points to note. Anyway, the questions, I just wondered really what was the charges that we paid as a council, or the interest rate for the loan of that 10 million?
paid 2%.
2%.
So the outcome there, Chair, was, well, we incurred a few £1,000s in interest, and the reason we had to do that was if the money had flowed out without the £10 million there, then we would be straight into a very substantial unplanned overdraft, and that would cost more than a little bit, several times the cost of it.
Is that okay, Councillor Turner? Thanks
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you, Chair.
Oh, thanks for that, Tony. Other questions? Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. Tony says there was no loss and the risk wasn't a risk there. But obviously there's a failure somewhere. And I'm just wondering whether it's internal controls that were at odds there. But how would we avoid this in future? Because it could have been a big risk. So some changes must have been made to avoid this occurring in the future.
Tony?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we have actually, essentially, we now have another check exercise at, to make sure we have actually got things squared off, that, that we don't already have significant money with the individual body.
Can I just ask at this point, it's appropriate, this report should be presented by a Director of Finance. Where are we on the position of the Director of Finance, which is a vacant post, and is important in the context of the external audit in the future?
I think it's a fair question. Gary, can you answer that?
Yeah, I can answer that. So members may recall that the Joint Committee asked the Council to look at the potential for a joint management team arrangement. It's kind of wrapped up in that a little bit, but I've spoken to Mrs. Smith about this. We will be going out probably in the next couple of months for advert on that post. Clearly COVID has had an impact on that, but probably now is the time to go out to the market again.
If you remember, I asked this question 2 months ago and was given that same answer. We're 2 months down the line now. Is it going to be another 2 months after the next 2 months? So I'm a bit disappointed.
I understand that, Councillor Clark, but we do have arrangements in place that are working effectively. So I accept that we need a longer term solution. As I've set out, we'll be doing that over there in the next couple of months.
Thanks, Gary. Any other questions from members of the committee? Thanks. Any questions from members not on the committee? Councillor Foster.
Chairman,
I'm sorry.
I just have another question for explanation, really, for my ignorance. On page 21, we've got a list there of investments over periods of 24 months and 12 months, etc. The end column says maturity date. I can understand the investment date, but I have difficulty understanding the maturity date to coincide with those periods of time. Is that correct? That it's the end of the investment?
Tony, can you help with that?
Certainly, Chair. Are you referring to the yellow and red, and I think it's meant to be orange, highlighted numbers? Yeah, those are the maximum durations. And some, let's see, I think there may be one or two that have been subject to, yes, some of them are effectively on shorter notice. So, as with the first two, there's a maximum of 6 months, but we can get the money back in less than the 6 months. And I think at this stage, we might actually have given notice, say, on those first two. So that's why there's coming a fixed break point.
Okay, that's fine, Tony. Thanks.
Councillor Foster.
Thanks, Chair. Just going back to some the comments Councillor Mrs. Smith made regarding the issues highlighted about the investments on page 16. I just think it's only right and reasonable that I absolutely support what Councillor Mrs Smith has said. Given obviously the officers have provided explanations, but I agree with her that it shouldn't happen. There's either a problem with the policy or there's a problem with the administration, the administering of the policy. So if the policy needs changing, it should be changed and should be brought forward to the Governance Committee for a review, or we need to make sure that we're clearly more robust in how we handle these investments, in my view. So just for the record, when things aren't right, I'll absolutely wholeheartedly support the comments that have been made, and it needs addressing. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Foster. I think we have covered that, and yeah, as robustly as we can manage that moving forward, we'd all appreciate that. But I think Tony has answered how that issue occurred. Any other questions from members not on the committee? No? Okay, so just looking to you guys again, is this something that we need to vote on, or are we just noting this? Just for noting, yeah. Okay, duly noted. Thanks very much for your work, Tony and James. Moving on to item 7, Internal Audit Plan 2020 to 2021. Chris, I believe that you're going to speak on this item.
Thank you, Chair. Yes. Members of the committee will generally have received prior to this meeting the proposed audit plan for the next 12 months, not for approval, just for information. And at this point, you'd be generally receiving a progress update against that plan. There are a couple of matters, though, that I want to bring to your attention, which has impacted on the progress of internal audit work this year. I'm reluctant to refer to COVID again because everyone seems to be using it as reasons why things haven't happened, but it is a genuine reason in relation to the progress of internal audit work. This is for two reasons. Firstly, the members of the internal audit team have been seconded into supporting the community hubs and have been working out of the community hubs and assisting members of the public and residents in that regard. And obviously that limits their ability to actually undertake internal audit work. The second issue, however, is in relation to the capacity of that team. They are currently running with 2 members of staff, permanent members, and 1 temporary member of staff. We have had over the last 12 months, well longer actually, 18 months, a temporary service lead, head of service post, chief internal audit. Their contract expired and under the procurement rules could not be renewed, so we've had to allow them to leave. Another member of staff actually got alternative employment, and we took on 2 interim auditors for a period of time in order to support the delivery of last year's audit plan. However, with the advent of COVID, or the summer months, it was not felt appropriate to renew the interim contracts, which had significant cost to the council. The other impact of COVID is actually the availability of services and teams to be audited. So obviously that has an impact on how these internal audits can be progressed. So that's just to give you a quick outline as to what the position is. The important question is what we are intending to do about it. We have presented to Shared Services Joint Committee, and it has been approved, a proposed new structure for internal audit. It re-establishes a service lead post to sit in the head of audit, and this, the view expressed and supported by the Joint Committee was that this gives the necessary seniority and responsibility to a post within the organisational structure. And we're also looking to introduce a new senior auditor post to take on some of the line management responsibilities for the audit team, but also have that level of experience to support the delivery of internal audit moving forward. Those proposals were approved last month, and they will, subject to the consultation, we're expecting the proposals to be approved for implementation from the beginning of October. Recruitment will follow immediately thereafter. So where does that leave us with the audit plan? Well, you'll see at Appendix 1 the proposed audit work to be completed this year. If I'm being perfectly candid, it's unlikely that all of this will be completed this year, given the constraints we've had to deal with so far. But Audit have been delivering work, and you can see that the council tax, NNDR and housing benefit audits have all been finalised and issued this year. And the statutory work to support our statutory responsibilities have also been delivered this year, including supporting the Statement of Accounts and AGS process, but also the NFI work that we do with the national data matching exercises that are done that support national initiatives around benefit fraud. I'm hoping to give greater detail at the next meeting, both in terms of recruitment but also in terms of progress against these audits. We are only just getting really back to some semblance of normality in some services and teams. Many of the audits you'll notice are actually follow-ups from previous audits. And if you note, some of these relate to teams such as environmental health in particular, who've had a significant amount of work to undertake this summer. Again, sorry, mentioning COVID again, but new duties and responsibilities have been introduced that they've had to pick up and run with, so we haven't actually been able to do some of these pieces of work either. I'm happy to take questions on the report, Chair.
Thanks, Chris. Candid is always good, and we all understand where we are with the COVID situation, but yeah, questions from the committee. Councillor Clark.
Chairman, this council has always been proactive on audit, and it's always been custom and practice to produce an audit plan in March ready for the business year. Now we've got one 6 months later and excuses are being used for COVID. There is no reason why. COVID only came in at the end of February, March. There was no reason why we couldn't have been proactive in producing an audit plan. And this plan, to me, looks as though it's written on the back of a cigarette pack, because it doesn't contain anything about priorities or risks in accordance with our risk management framework. It is poor. It doesn't include any allocation of resources. We're halfway through the year. How much has it been allocated to resources already? And how many of these are on the line? It is a poor report, I think. And if we do this in the future, I will be ashamed of this council, because it's just not on. This is not a comprehensive audit plan, and it should be. Thank you.
Chris.
Thank you, Chair.
As far as reporting direct to the governance committee, there was a post of head of assurance services who had a direct link. Who is going to do that? Who's going to carry that responsibility in the future? Is it going to be this shared link or not?
Okay, Chris.
Okay, dealing with your first point first, Colin, Councillor Clark. Yeah, I agree. It's not acceptable. And like I say, I'm being perfectly candid. I'm not trying to hide anything. And because I think that's what got this council into the situation it got itself in with the AGS, that things weren't presented to members, you know, candidly. And honestly, you're right. I'm not going to argue with you. It's not an acceptable plan. But that's what I've got. That's where we are with it. The head of service role that I mentioned, yes, it will be the new equivalent of the former head of shared assurance services, that old role. So yes, it will be the direct link, but that post is currently doesn't exist, and there is nobody filling that function at the moment other than myself.
As far as this committee is concerned, we need to know what a high risk, what a medium risk, what a low risk, so some priority can be given to those. Otherwise, we're not doing our job as a governance committee.
Chris?
Yeah, just to be clear, the internal audit plan is presented for information. It's not for approval by governance committee. The audit plan has been put together based on an assessment of risk of different areas. This hasn't just been thrown together. I know it looks like it, but some background work did go into it. And this involves at the time when Janice was still here, who was fulfilling the chief head of internal audit role. She put this together with myself and the Section 151 officer. So we did do a review in accordance with the council's risk management framework, and that This was the proposed areas for audit that came out of that.
I'll have to accept what you say.
Councillor Mrs Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You did just mention Janice Bamber, I think her name was. And I take it that when we're talking on page 42 about her contract had been extended for 2 occasions and therefore it couldn't go through the procurement because it would have breached procurement rules. We must have known that very early on, that we're coming to the end of a contract, so therefore there doesn't seem to have been any pre-planning as to how we're going to get over that problem. And also we're talking now about it's gone through shared services, which I know, and I accept that, but we're now talking it's got to go through consultation, and it's going to be October at the very earliest before we can go out to start recruiting. If somebody is coming from another authority, we're going to have 3 months for them to give their notice in before we can even recruit them actually into the establishment. So we're looking probably the beginning of January before we actually get some people imposed to this particular post, which is the senior or the head of internal audit and also the senior auditor. So we've got these people who have been fulfilling of the duties within the hub. I presume they are now have been to a certain extent released from that. They're now back in the place that they should be, which is doing the audit. But still, we've got these huge gaps as far as I can see. How are we going to even get anywhere near fulfilling this audit plan, which we've got here, which is a lot of it is unallocated, I can see that. But how are we going to actually fulfill at least part of this if we've got all these gaps that we're going to have to recruit to, and we're still not really getting any further with the people that are, we've got all the gaps there.
No, again, I don't disagree with much of what you say, Councillor Smith. The way we will deliver it is that we will prioritise based on the highlighted risks within the audit plan, and we will ensure that the higher risk parts of the audit will be delivered. We have, as I mentioned, appointed a temporary auditor, a senior temporary auditor, who is assisting with the delivery of the audit plan. Unfortunately, and it does seem like a series of excuses, it's not intended to, we got back word from someone who had been appointed the day before they were due to start. The appointee was able to start, but then had a pre-booked holiday, which commenced a week after they started. So I haven't even actually managed to spend any time with them yet to get some of the additional detail to fill out this report. But I can give you assurance that the council will meet its obligations and will be in a position in March, April time that the head of internal audit or whoever is required to do it at that point will be able to say, I am satisfied that the internal governance arrangements of Salisbury Council have been tested.
Fine, okay. So we've got some temporary cover. Nevertheless, we're still going to have to prioritise quite a lot of what is on this worksheet. Is it possible that we can, before the next meeting, which is in November, which is a long, we're what, 6 to 8 weeks away from that, can we have before then a schedule of the priorities and the high risks that need to be actually put forward, and that at least we as a committee know that there is some priority going into these particular audits, and if we feel that there is something there that we want to have a priority, we can at least highlight that to you. Because I think to wait till November, and it's the middle of November, I think it's far too long before we actually know what's going on properly. Thank you.
Chris,
yeah, of course.
Entirely reasonable question.
Of course.
And request.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. Thanks for that, Councillor Smith. Any other questions from the committee? Councillor Sharples.
Yeah, it's really for my benefit of knowing a bit more about it, and it's a bit of a tongue-in-cheek question, really. You talk about the interim manager role, and because of the procurement limits, is there mileage for changing the procurement limits? And why would that person not be offered like a full-time post? It's just out of interest, really.
Chris?
No, there wasn't scope to increase the financial limit because we'd pressed up towards the EU threshold, which is lower than you'd expect for services contracts. It's about £170,000, which isn't a massive sum of money. Sorry, what was the second part of the question?
I just wondered why the person concerned wasn't offered a full-time post. Out of curiosity.
Yeah, just to give some context to this, which I think is really important. The reason that we haven't resolved the head of internal audit post is because that individual was engaged in the Heather McManus investigation, in which case we didn't know when that was going to end, and as a consequence that contract went on probably longer than we would have liked, and as a consequence we haven't been able to fill that post as we would see fit. It also goes back to a decision that was made probably 2 years ago around the role of the head of internal audit. And again, for context, some of our more experienced auditors have left this organisation because of the lack of support they felt they were getting in some of the issues that we're raising. So yes, there are issues. Some of them are historic issues. Chris has set out the plan for the year. I agree with Colin. The committee probably would have liked and should have got more detail. But you have the assurance from the Director of Governance and from myself that we will resource this plan now to make sure that the arrangements, and I said this last year, because we had the same issue last year, slightly different this year because we have had the COVID scenario. But yeah, last year, and I can't remember the number, but 80% of the plan was delivered last year. So you have those assurances from both myself and from Chris that we will resource this plan to make sure that it's delivered.
Thanks, Gary. And
sorry, Chair, can I just come back on the second part of Councillor Sharple's query, which is why we couldn't just offer her Janice the job. Well, it would have been a very practical solution to it, but I think one of the things that has been highlighted is the failure of the council to follow its own HR and procedures. That's not the correct way to do it. We would have been obliged really to go out to test the open market on this. And this is one of the things that I found myself in a very difficult situation in relation to this. Is on the one hand, I would have loved to have extended the contract, but I'm there handing in an AGS to this committee saying, you know, there's been a series of quite serious governance failings around procurement, and I'd be going behind procurement in order to do it. And that's not the way to do it. I'd rather you tell me off now rather than do something wrong then.
thanks, Chris. Very candid again. Any questions from any other members of the committee? Councillors not on the committee. Councillor Mr. Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, I, for one, I'm glad that we're looking seriously at an internal audit, and I'm certainly glad there's going to be a change in there. I really am. With regard to not being supported, if I'm just getting the right words, it's internal audit report directly to the audit committee, if I'm not mistaken. That's the way it's always been, and it's the audit committee that supports, I would have said, the auditor itself on the presentation of the reports that actually come to the governance committee. Is that not correct? Or
Chris?
I'm not quite sure what you mean. Sorry, I think it's always this desk. Yes, internal audit do report to governance committee and knows certain duties to them, but they're obviously officers of the council, so ultimately would be reporting in response under the auspices of the paid service.
Is that okay?
If I can just clarify.
Sorry, Gary.
I think I get your question, Bill. So I think so. In Chris is right that obviously they have a direct reporting line. The issue about audit, and it's something that you just mentioned then actually, which I know you're not happy with, but it is about the independence of audit. So the internal auditor has a direct line, not management, but direct reporting line into the chair of governance. Yeah. And that's where you get the independence from. So in this instance, whilst we don't have one, Chris has that direct line reporting directly into the chair of governance.
Thank you. That does answer the question.
Yeah, they're between us.
Okay, thanks very much. Any other questions or comments? Okay, so that brings us to the end of that item. And just to finish on that, it would be fair to say that myself and Chris have had a robust conversation, shall we say, around this item, and the points have been highlighted today by other members of the committee. So we look forward to that interim report, shall we call it, as requested by Councillor Mrs Smith. We look forward to that being brought forward.
I think it would be helpful.
Thanks very much. Okay, and again, is this just for noting? Okay, duly noted. Which moves us on to item 8, AGS Action Plan update, and it's you again, Chris.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's a report for noting for the committee, because it's an update in relation to the actions that were adopted by Governance Committee from the action plan in the AGS. There is a table at paragraph 7 which details all the actions that were approved, and the progress against each action. I'm quite happy to go through each one in turn, Chair, but if required. But the overall message is a positive one. All actions have been. Most actions have been performed in accordance with the timetable that's set, and I'm sure members will agree it was quite a testing timetable, given that the AGS was only approved in June. So I think the only outstanding ones that still require further work, the review of the Council's constitution, which does sit with me. The review has largely been completed, but it will require consideration by the governance constitution group. So I think that's the name of it, and that will be presented shortly. Other ones that are outstanding, or I'll say outstanding, but they're not behind. There is where is it? Yeah, sorry. In fact, no, I don't think. I think that's the only one that's currently actually not in accordance with the timetable. There's been a full review of the policies highlighted, and they've all been reviewed and republished by the Council. We've also considered the risk management policy strategy and framework. The risk management strategy policy has been reviewed, but there's also going to be a new approach to risk management, which will include responsibility for the Council's strategic risk register to move to sit within the Transformation and Partnerships Service. Responsibility for the risk management framework will remain with audit. The governance and ethical awareness training has been delivered to all members, or been made available to all members, and there was very good attendance from both all 4 of the sessions, and further training will be presented to officers, and those sessions are in the process of being arranged as we speak. I've mentioned the Constitution. The review of shared services structures and processes, that is, well, it's certainly on target. The new structures have been approved by Shared Services Joint Committee. The consultation finishes at the end of this week with a view to, finishes at the end of this week, with a view to decisions being taken on the adoption or otherwise changes to the proposed structures being lined up for the beginning of October. And at the end of this month, Council will receive proposals for a new shared services pay policy, which again has been through Shared Services Joint Committee. The work in relation to the Council's Transparency Code has been completed, and further work is now being undertaken to ensure that that is embedded within the leadership team. and the development for a process for business planning has also been undertaken, and that will be rolled out. I think it's beginning of October, isn't it? In order to fit in with the council's processes for business planning. A new performance management framework and data quality policy has been developed and is with the leadership team for approval, as is the organisational development strategy, which has been developed and approved for implementation, but the delivery is still, we just started. In fact, I think it was last week we launched the new FLAIR programme, which is a development opportunity for staff members who are keen on progressing and showing a certain commitment to the organisation and commitment to development and improvement. It's actually a really good scheme. I don't know if you get the opportunity to see, but it gives staff members who perhaps can't progress in the organisation the opportunity to develop skills that will enable them to be in a better position to apply for a new job internally or externally going forward. So if we can't promote people, we'll certainly develop them. The communication strategy, it's in progress, and it should be ready for communication to yourselves by the end of October, beginning of November, in accordance with the timetable. The consultation framework and community engagement strategy, I've just marked that as ongoing. We haven't put an actual time for delivery on that because it is dependent on some of the other pieces of work, not least the communication strategy moving forward. But that will certainly be delivered before the end of this year, municipal year. One of the points that perhaps Councillor Clark was alluding to earlier, which is around the approach to monitoring, managing the implementation of management actions from internal audits. Formally, they would only have been received by the service who were impacted by the audit, and governance committee would only see them where there'd been either an audit indicating that they were failing or they had failed to deliver the management actions in a timely way. We've changed that slightly so that the same reporting lines that come to governance committee will also come to leadership team. And what this effectively means is that where members of leadership team can see a service failing, a governance failing in a service, it's a reminder to check their own, so that you get a double benefit of it. Not only does that particular service improve, but you also roll out that learning across the organisation. So it's a small change, but I think it could have significant benefits. The HR policy framework has been reviewed, and policies have been are scheduled for consultation and approval by joint committee. So again, that piece of work has been progressed. And then finally, the partnerships framework is marked as ongoing, but again, it's at early stages yet, but that isn't due for delivery until March of next year. So, as I say, I think there's quite a meaty list of actions that came out of the AGS work, and we're well on with most of them, if not having delivered them. So again, I'm happy to take questions on the report, Chair.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for taking us through that update. Questions from members of the committee? Councillor Clark?
Yeah, thanks for that, Chris. It's very helpful. I just wanted to ask, really, because any policies have to go to council for approval, and I'm just wondering on internal communications as to how members generally get to know when reviews and updates take place, because presumably they're not going back to council. So what's the mechanism for that?
Thank you, Chair. But I think there's two categories of policy. There's the external facing policies, which you're right, do need to go through council. The ones that are being addressed in here, which are external, will come through council where needed. Some of the policies that I've mentioned don't need to, because they're internal facing policies. They're how we discharge the operational business of the council. So, and this was the point around these matters being within the AGS. They came out of identified failings of how we were acting as officers of the council, in our decision-making structures internally. So that's why they don't always mention coming back to council. Some of them will do, quite a few of them won't.
Yeah, that's why I asked the question, basically, because in the past we've had various versions which haven't been dated or given a version number, and the members haven't realised that there's been changes in the policy, so that's the reason why I asked that question.
Just on that point, it is a good one. We're looking at making sure we have one of the pieces of work. It's not on here, but is edition management, I suppose you'd call it, of a policy. So every time we review a policy, we will ensure it is marked up that it has been reviewed, but also it will be marked up for a further review after a period of time. So it's just a reminder, it's just a process we'll be doing internally to make sure that there is awareness of that.
Can I just ask you a supplementary question about the constitution, because we did approve changes to Governance Committee, which went to Council for approval, and I'm just wondering when in fact the constitution is going to be updated, because those have gone through Council. And obviously there are additional ones that need to go through Council, and it's important to get the Constitution up to date as quickly as possible. And I've been asking the question, and I've posed this to the Chief Executive, it's important to have the Constitution updated as soon as we possibly can.
Right, so I'm just checking with the Oracle. Yeah, they will be on next week. You can rest assured though, as soon as Council approve a change, the change is implemented from that date. I appreciate that's not ideal for the public who might be looking at the document itself, but from the point of view of the decision making and the use of it, we will ensure that we are complying with the Constitution as amended by Council from the point of the change.
Gary,
Chair, could I just pick up a point about some of the internal policies? Again, I think this is where there have been gaps previously, and that everybody's not cited on what has been signed off, what's been reviewed, etc., etc. So one of the changes we have implemented, and not all members are cited on them. So what we have implemented is that my expectation now is all internal policies will be signed off by the portfolio holder and published, so that members are cited on them. So you should be able to see all the policy updates coming through on the EMD sign-offs.
Thanks, Gary. Questions from other members of the committee? Councillor Mrs. Smith.
A quick question, if Chris could help me. It says on the risk management, it is proposed to remove the responsibility of corporate risk into the transformation partnership service. How does that work, and how's it going to help and benefit?
Well, that's the service, that's the team that oversee the development of the council's, assisting in the development of the council's corporate strategy, corporate priorities. So placing the council's corporate risk register in the same place is very helpful in many respects, because a lot of the time it's the strategy and the priorities that can drive changes to the risk. So it's all kept in the same location. It's not an unusual step to take or an unusual place for it to be. I think if you ask around, quite a lot of authorities keep the corporate documents together in one service.
Out of interest, wanted to know.
Thanks, Chris. Any other questions from members of the committee? Nope. Members not on the committee? No? Marvellous. That brings us to the end of that item, and it is just for noting, so noted, and that brings us to the end of our meeting. Thanks very much to all the reports and all the work from all our officers, the external auditors, and for members of the committee. We'll see you again very soon. When's the next meeting? I forgot, November the 17th, was it? Okay. All right, look forward to that. Thanks very much.